Three massive decisions in FPL this week. Who are my Salah and Son replacements? Should I be bringing back Erling Haaland? And importantly, who should I be captaining in Game Week 21? All this and more in my latest team selection video. Hey everyone, Sam here, otherwise known as FPL Pricey, and today we're going to be tackling all of the key questions ahead of Game Week 21 to help me and you get set up ahead of the deadline and what is a pretty important period in FPL coming up over the next few game weeks. First off, let's take a look at my Game Week 20 performance very quickly. 87 points was enough for a pretty decent green arrow. It could have been bigger, but overall, I'm pretty happy with the performance. 80k up, I think it was, from 430 to 350k. So hopefully we can start putting together those green arrows back to back now and rising up to that top 100k in the next few game weeks. Reflecting on the team quickly, obviously Palmer and Salah were the highlights and all of my front seven returned, which was great to see. However, my back lineup, including my goalkeeper, so all four of them failed to get any points whatsoever. So 3 combined points between them. 84 in my front seven means it was a very top heavy game week, but overall pretty happy with the performance. Let me know in the comments below how you did in Game Week 20. So before we move on to the juicy stuff, I wanted to quickly mention a defensive transfer that I am considering this week, although I think it's more likely I make it in the weeks to come. But Estupinan is a player that I'm highly considering at the moment. He is top of my watch list for defenders right now, and I think it's easy to see why when you look at his underlying attacking data. Now, he has come back from a pretty long injury layoff, but he's got good minutes in the tank over the last couple of weeks and scored 2 goals recently as well. And as you can see, the fixtures for the next 4 are fantastic. In fact, they go far beyond that as well. And I'd say the fixtures for the next 7 or 8 are looking really good for Brighton. Now, they don't keep a lot of clean sheets, but I think the underlying attacking data is strong enough to be considering a player like him, especially when so many other defenders are failing to keep clean sheets at the moment as well. Now, Jamal Lascelles would be the player that I'm most likely to sell to bring in Estupinan. Obviously, Lascelles has lost his place in the team. They've got some pretty rough fixtures to come anyway over the next 4, so I think overall he's a pretty easy sell. One thing I would mention is that he's not a priority this week because there are other moves elsewhere that a lot of us will be making, and it's probably a transfer that I can hold off on because my backline doesn't look like it needs an extra defender for this game week. So on to one of, if not the key topic this week, and I, like many others, have both Salah and Son in my starting 11 at the moment, so I probably need to sell both of them. Now, there is an argument to say that maybe you don't need to sell both immediately. Maybe you could hold off a week on one of them and assess your options afterwards once we've got more information. Now, if you are looking at that strategy, I'd probably recommend selling Son ahead of Salah this game week. The reason for that is that Liverpool could double in Game Week 25, and we should find out a lot more information in the gap between Game Week 21 and Game Week 22. Obviously, there's always a chance that Egypt or, of course, South Korea get knocked out fairly early in their respective tournaments, but I think with Salah in mind in particular, because of that double game week potential in 25, he is probably a slightly more difficult sell than Son is. However, with that being said, I'm planning on selling both this game week. So looking at the 2 replacements, it is a difficult call. There are a lot of options out there. I put out a video last week with the 10 best options, and to be honest, there could be even more than that. I've narrowed it down to a few, and not all of them are going to make it onto the screen now, but my 2 favourites are probably Bowen, if he's fit, and Phil Foden at the moment. Now, those are both fairly template picks. I've also got 2 others that are going to appear on screen in just a moment that are going to be pretty major differentials, but I'm incredibly tempted to do at least one of them and possibly only one of these 2 more popular picks. Now, looking at Bowen in isolation, I think it's going to be pretty difficult to buy him if you don't have him already, if we don't get news that he's going to be fit ahead of the Game Week 21 deadline. Now, obviously, West Ham play in the back end of quite a long game week, so we probably won't get any press conference news or any sort of injury update through training photos because they're probably just taking a little bit of a break at the moment. The other thing to consider with Bowen is the fact that Kudus isn't there and Paquetá went off injured in the most recent game week, or the most recent match even in the FA Cup. as well after not very long on the pitch. So Bowen obviously hobbled off. He's a doubt, but creatively, they might be missing one or two of their key players as well. So that takes Bowen slightly down in my estimations. Although if we get any sort of word that he himself is going to be fit, he probably comes in as one of my favourite picks, even with that lack of creativity around him. However, I think it's pretty likely we won't get that news. So if I move past Bowen, I'd probably be looking at Phil Foden as the first player that I'm going to be bringing in. Again, not locked in by any means, but I think he is more likely to be starting week in, week out for City than he ever has done before. Yes, he probably will get the odd rotation. He'll get the odd rest here and there around the Champions League. But over the next 3 or 4 game weeks, especially with KDB still getting nursed back to full fitness and probably not going to be starting too many games, he will probably be taking up that central role in that 10 where he's looked really, really electric in the last few game weeks. His data has increased recently in that role as well. And Pep himself has said how impressed he's been with him playing centrally. Now, there is an argument to say that he'll be slightly impacted negatively with Haaland coming back, which will be probably quite soon. And it means that he probably won't be one of the central focuses in attacking build-up play. And obviously, Alvarez could drop into that central role. All of that being said, I think even if he does play out wide, even if the minutes are managed even very slightly, Phil Foden is in the form of his life. I'm more than happy to recommend him. And a bit like Liverpool, Man City are pretty likely to get that double game week in 25 and importantly won't blank in 26 either. So I think overall the benefits massively outweigh the negatives on Foden, and he's a player that I can quite comfortably recommend ahead of game week 21. Now, there are 2 pretty major differentials that I want to take a look at. And if Bowen isn't fit, I probably need to pick at least one of them. So let's take a look at those players now. So you might well laugh at me for this, but 2 players that are catching my eye as options ahead of Game Week 21 are 2 ultra differentials and 2 players that a lot of us will not be considering. One of which is Garnacho. Now, I think with Garnacho in mind in particular, because he's 4.8, that makes him a really good value play here. Importantly, buying someone like him makes it really, really easy to get back to Mo Salah around game week 24 or 25 when he comes back. And it means that whilst other managers might need to take a hit to do so, you would probably have the money in the bank to just buy him straight back without the hit in one move from one of your other midfielders. With Rashford, obviously there isn't that benefit, but he has returned in his last 2 game weeks and he is a very streaky player. He even returned in the FA Cup last night as well, so he's now returned in his last 3 Man United matches. And when he gets on a roll, he can really take off. And I think a player like him could be an ultra differential that a lot of people are going to just turn their noses up at because Man United have been poor all season. Both Garnacho and Rashford are not really fancy picks at the moment. But I think with both of them, the fixtures are there, especially with Tottenham and Wolves, who Tottenham in particular will have their fullbacks bombing on high, and both Garnacho and Rashford down the wings could really benefit from that. Wolves, without Aït-Nouri at the back as well, Garnacho could really benefit from that down that wing. And then importantly, game week 25 and 26 is where the strategy comes into play. Now, the important fixture here is Liverpool versus Fulham in the Carabao Cup semi-final. Now, depending on who goes through that, we'll have a different blank in game week 26. The more likely outcome, of course, is that Liverpool will progress through to the Carabao Cup final and therefore most likely be blanking in game week 26. If that happens, it looks fairly likely that Liverpool will double in game week 25 and then blank in game week 26, which means that you'll probably not really want to use your free transfers to buy players like Mo Salah back for just 1 game week before they blank again. Now, if that happens and Liverpool do blank in game week 26, double in 25, the free hit becomes a lot more tempting. The reason for that is because you can get the doubles, you can get Mo Salah back after a long layoff at AFCON, so you don't need to worry about using your transfers there. And then in game week 26, he blanks again anyway, and you've got Man United assets at home to Fulham that game week, so you don't even need to worry. You've already got a great team in place. You've got players in place that can come straight back into your 11. You don't need to use free transfers. And importantly, you can then use those transfers the next week or the week after and look at bringing the Liverpool players back in then, having not had to worry about Mo Salah for quite a few game weeks at that point. Now, if the less likely outcome happens, that Fulham progress, then Man United are going to be blanking in game week 26 anyway, and you can look at buying your Liverpool players back for the Man United assets, or in Garnacho's case, even bench Garnacho in game week 26 because he is 4.8 million. You can afford 8 good attackers if you've got a player like him in your side, and you can bring in Mo Salah for one of your other midfielders, and all of a sudden you've got back to Mo without having to take a hit as well. So I think with Man United players, there's a bit of strategy at play there, and there are other options that are in my consideration, but I think all of them have slight negatives. Now, obviously, Man United players have the negative of the fact that they're playing for a team that is a bit dysfunctional at the moment. Garnacho's underlying attacking data isn't the best, but it is important to note that now he's playing 90 minutes, it is increasing week on week, and a lot of that is front-loaded with XG. He's averaging 0.31 XG per 90, which means on average, he's expected a goal every 3 games, which isn't bad. Rashford as well, XG is very good, even though he's been flattering to deceive this season. The underlying data is still not bad, and like I've mentioned, he's such a streaky player. If he gets on a roll, he can be extremely explosive, and he is playing in that favoured left-wing role. Now, with other players, so Diogo Jota is in my mind, but I'm a little bit worried about his expected minutes. And because he's another Liverpool player, it might make it a little bit awkward to get back to Mo Salah in game week 25 if they double. And if they don't, do you want to be wasting your free transfers on switching Liverpool players around? I'm not so sure you do. And because of his expected minutes being around 60 a match, is he explosive enough to make that worthwhile? Maybe yes, and maybe he will be a good pick still, but there's just something in the back of my mind saying that making that move probably limits me moving forwards. Now, the other player that I am eyeing up is Richarlison. His XG per 90 is absolutely fantastic, and he's probably going to be on penalties with Son out as well. Now, Son being out does impact him, and that is one negative mark against Richarlison, but for what it's worth, I still think he'll tick over really nicely. The other important thing with Spurs, though, is that they're another team that are quite likely to blank in game week 26, and if I go for Richarlison, I'm kind of hoping that Chelsea have to get knocked out against Middlesbrough in the Carabao Cup semi-final so that the Chelsea-Tottenham game doesn't become a blank in game week 26. Now, that's fairly unlikely. It looks likely that Chelsea are going to progress to the final, which means that Richarlison and all of my other Spurs assets and Chelsea assets would probably blank in game week 26 as well, which means that all of a sudden I'm looking really thin on the ground in game week 26, and I might have had to use my free hit in game week 25 to get all the Liverpool players in anyway. So having Richarlison means that it's another free transfer that I'm probably going to have to use. It's another player that I'm going to have to worry about in game week 26. And I'm not sure that having too many of those players is a good idea, considering I've already got Palmer, I've already got Porro, I'll probably have Liverpool assets as well. It's going to be quite difficult to hold all of these players. So Richarlison becomes quite a difficult player to hold on the chance that that Spurs-Chelsea game becomes a blank. There are a few other options. I did discuss 10 of my favourite Game Week 21 midfielder replacements for Salah and Son in my video earlier this game week, so do go check that out if you have the time. But for now, I think these are probably my top 4 most likely players to bring in. Obviously, Bowen and Foden are the 2 most likely, but Bowen looking less likely to be fit means that Garnacho and Rashford do come into play for me. So the final transfer option that I want to talk about very quickly is Erling Haaland. Now, we don't know whether he's going to be fully fit for the Newcastle game. It is unlikely we'll get news, although it is possible. And if we get confirmed news that he's going to be starting in Game Week 21, I think this is a pretty easy transfer to make. Yes, Darwin has got some decent fixtures. Yes, Bournemouth is a very good fixture in 21. And yes, this would probably be for a hit. But I think overall, it's better for me to just get this move done if we get news that Haaland is confirmed starting, especially because he probably would be my favoured captaincy option if he does. Now, I think it's unlikely I do get the chance to make this move because we're probably not going to get confirmation before the deadline that Haaland's going to be starting this game. So this is probably a move that waits until game week 22 now. But if we do get news, I just wanted to provide the information that I probably will be making this move for a -4, despite the fact that Darwin's fixtures and the fact he'll get increased minutes, increased responsibility without Salah in the team. I still think this is a move that I'm going to be making if we get that news. So, we obviously could get the news that Haaland is going to start in Game Week 21, as I've just discussed. And if we do, I think he is probably the most likely captaincy option. However, in the likely outcome that we don't get that news, I think it's important to assess all the other Game Week 21 captains, because it is going to be a split camp this week. There is going to be a lot of opportunity to gain significant rank over others if you get the captaincy right. And I think there are a lot of very good options. Now, the 6 on this spreadsheet are the ones that I'd probably most likely be considering, but that's not to say that there aren't other options elsewhere that you could be looking at. So do let me know in the comments below if you're eyeing up someone who's not on this matrix, because I'd love to discuss them. However, I think 3 players that I in particular want to discuss from this spreadsheet, and I wouldn't rule out any of these, but the 3 that I'm most likely to be considering this game week are, number 1, Cole Palmer. Now, yes, he's got an early kickoff on the Saturday morning, but that home fixture against Fulham is decent. The underlying XG per 90, or XGI per 90 rather, is very, very good. More than 0.75 a game is extremely good. And of course, he's on penalties as well. We've also seen how explosive he can be as well, which is a big upside to having a captain like that in your team. And I think despite the fact he's playing early, I wouldn't really let that put me off this game week, especially because it's a very long, very drawn out game week, and having a player at the start of the game week that you've probably got a little bit more insight on whether or not he's fit, then I think it's a safer call. Now, you could pick a captain later on in the game week to give you something to look forward to, but there is always that risk that because we won't get that team news before the deadline, that some sort of freak accident could happen and they could get injured or rotated, and there's nothing we can do about it at that point. That being said, it is something nice to look forward to, knowing that you've still got your captain to come, and there are options later on in the game week that I think you could consider. Now, Saka is probably next on my list for likely captains in Game Week 21. The Crystal Palace home fixture isn't bad by any means. I don't think it's as good as the Fulham fixture, and his underlying data isn't quite as strong as Palmer, but with Saka, we've got the benefit of several years worth of knowledge of how good he is as an FPL asset. He is on track for another 200-pointer, even though he has been flattering to deceive a little bit recently. His data has still been really strong. Now, Crystal Palace historically have been a really good defence, so I'm not sure that he would be my favoured captaincy option ahead of Palmer, although it is worth noting that in Palmer's case, he does go directly up against Palhinha in that midfield area, and I expect him to get man-marked, so it might not be all easy for Palmer in that fixture. However, on the balance of things, out of those 2, I probably do favour Palmer at this exact moment in time. There is a third captaincy option I am considering, and that is Trent Alexander-Arnold. Now, I think if it wasn't for the fact that Bournemouth have been free scoring as of late, he'd probably be my favourite out of all of them. But obviously, that underlying attacking data isn't quite as strong as anyone else on this spreadsheet, but he does have the benefit of the potential clean sheets. I think, like I mentioned, if it was at home for Liverpool and if Bournemouth weren't looking quite so good in front of goal, I'd be more tempted to do this. But I do expect Liverpool to concede in this match, which means that I'm relying on Trent to get, if not 1, 2 attacking returns to make that call worth it this game week. He's very good on bonus, so 1 attacking return might be enough for a decent haul, even if they do concede. But really, I'm looking for that explosive haul this game week to really differentiate myself and rise me up the ranks really quickly. And I think Palmer is more likely to get several returns in a match than the likes of Saka and Trent at the moment, which is probably why I'm leaning towards him over all of the other options as it stands. So let's take a look at my side with the 2 most likely free transfers loaded into the team. And those 2 most likely transfers as it stands, based on the information we've got available to us at the moment, would probably be Foden and Garnacho in. As I mentioned, Garnacho becomes a bit of an enabler to get back to Salah later, and I don't think he's going to be that far behind some of the other options that a lot of managers are looking at bringing in for 3 or 4 million more than Garnacho is over the next stretch of fixtures. Now, making those 2 free transfers again, I've got those 2 free transfers, so I don't need to take a hit to make those 2 moves. It does mean that I would all of a sudden have 13 million in the bank, which is a ridiculous amount of money to have spare. But it is important to note that if Haaland's not fit this game week, I would probably be bringing him in next game week for Darwin. I could potentially look at bringing him in for Archer, but again, I would quite like to leave a bit of money spare to make that Salah move later on for free. And that is a pretty important part of my strategy if I play it this way. Now, one other move that, again, I've mentioned already, I could easily make, and if we get confirmed news that Haaland is starting, I will take the -4 to remove Darwin, bring in Haaland, and probably put the armband on him. But for the time being, I think just making those 2 free transfers is absolutely fine. And I'm probably going to be putting the captaincy armband on Cole Palmer because I think he's probably the most likely to be an explosive option this game week. Overall, I'm pretty happy with my starting 11. I don't think there are too many issues there. And I do have Taylor and Archer both on my bench to come in if some sort of very unlucky injury strikes in the last minute or through the game week. Because it's a long game week, who knows what could happen. We could get injuries that happen after the deadline. So having Taylor and Archer on my bench is probably not the worst thing. Although it looks unlikely Taylor's going to play, Archer's probably going to be the one that does have to come in there. Overall, pretty happy with my 11. I'm very happy with the fact that I probably don't need to take a -4. But obviously, I am willing to if we get confirmed news on Haaland being fit. So that's my team selection ahead of Game Week 21. It is important to note that because I'm recording this very early, I'm not locked in on those moves yet, but those are probably my most likely moves as it stands. I will lock in later on in the week and I will be posting that on X. So do make sure you go and follow me over there for my final team news. Now, if you want to leave your favoured Salah and Son replacements in the comments below, that would be really helpful and we can discuss it at length in the comments before the deadline. And of course, any other questions you have, do feel free to leave them in the comments and I'll get back to you before that all-important Friday deadline. In the meantime, if you could leave a like and subscribe to the channel, that would be greatly appreciated. It really does go a long way. And of course, it means you won't miss out on any future content from me. However, for now, I hope you all have a great Game Week 21. I hope that your midfield transfers, wherever they may go, pay off for you. And I'll see you on the other side as we start preparing for Game Week 22.